Chapter 9, Section 5. Johnny, riding Sandy and leading Nan, came down Frog Lane, skirting the common. He was more cautious nowadays about crossing through the British encampment. Exercising Colonel Smith's horses was Dove's work, but Johnny always did it for him and let Dove sleep. On the common he could see that Earl Percy was parading his entire brigade, all three regiments. But Percy was always doing that. He kept after his men, training and drilling them more than any other commander in Boston. He was a first-class officer. Although the heights of the common were filled with men marching, forming columns and whatnot, Johnny believed he could sneak in by the hurdles and let Sandy and Nan graze along the Charles. He knew this fresh grass was as dear to them as sweets would be to him, if he could get them. The day was so warm he rode in his shirt sleeves. April was more like May than spring. He was filled with lassitude and a sense of peace. As he turned in the path along the lower end of the common, he was thinking of nothing except only how much the horses would enjoy the fresh grass and how much he would like some sweets himself. He did notice a small group of redcoats doing something down among the salt marshes. They might be catching eels for all he knew or cared. The horses dropped their heads, spread their legs a little, and tore ravenously at the green shoots of grass. Then he heard a somber rolling of the drums, not the usual brisk tattoos. Seemingly all Percy's brigade were marching down upon him. The only place they did not inundate was the patch of hard earth where the hurdles were and where he now sat with Sandy and Nan. They were bringing up platoon after platoon. Sandy, the old war horse, hearing the drums, the tramp of feet, immediately lifted his head, arched his neck, cocked his tail, and struck a martial attitude. Nan did not hold much by anything connected with the army. She went on eating. Johnny looked about him. For the first time he took in what that small band of redcoats, so close to the salt marsh, was about. He saw the chaplain reading from his open prayer book, the wooded coffin, the hastily dug grave. Those 8 men and their officer were not out catching eels, as they should have been on so fair and lazy a day. They were a firing squad. That man tied and blindfolded was a deserter. Percy had ordered out his entire brigade to watch, hoping it would cure them of any itch to desert. A blue smock, a mop of orange hair. So they had caught Pumpkin. He was not to die in the handsome uniform of the king's own regiment, which he had disgraced, but in the farm clothes Johnny had procured for him. The boy gritted his teeth, but he was trapped among the hurdles. He could not get away. Standing at attention, eyes straight ahead, were 1,000 or 2,000 men in front of him, and behind him the firing squad. In the river, the drummers in their high bearskin caps stood with lifted sticks, waiting. The sound of the volley and the roll of the drums came together. What had happened behind his back he saw reflected in the stony eyes, the white and sweating faces before him. One young officer looked positively green. Only Sandy seemed to enjoy the occasion. As he heard the drums and the firing, he lifted his head even higher. Nan squirmed. If Colonel Smith had been on her, he would doubtless have rolled off. Johnny put his hands to his face. It was wet and his hands were shaky. He thought of that blue smock his mother had made him, now torn by bullets. Pumpkin had wanted so little out of life. A farm, cows. True, Rab had got the musket he craved, but Pumpkin wasn't going to get his farm. Nothing more than a few feet by a few feet at the foot of Boston Common. That much Yankee land he'd hold up to Judgment Day. Up, up, up! The firing squad was coming up behind him. He did not turn his head. Now they were passing close to him, their backs coming into his range of vision. Grenadiers they were, in bearskin caps, coat-tails buttoned back to show their white breeches, squared scarlet shoulders, and on each shoulder a musket. Each musket ended with a wicked round eye, watching him, so it seemed. 8 cruel eyes. It was like looking into the face of death. Johnny had always been bold enough, taking about what came, never fearing a fight, and there was much fighting among the boys along the wharves. He had never once doubted his physical courage, but now he did. He could not see how anyone, certainly not himself, could ever have the courage to stand up and face those murderous little lives. That night, for one horrible moment, he was glad his hand was crippled. He would never have to face the round eye of death at the end of a musket. For days he felt his own inadequacy. Was the bold Johnny Tremain really a coward at heart? Had Rab ever felt as he did now? You could not guess by looking at him. If he had had any qualms, he would never mention them. Johnny decided to do the same, but Pumpkin's death badly unnerved him.